let's talk about 7 tips for writing a great discussion guide. So listen, you know this. There are a number of factors that go into a really successful, effective, qualitative study. And the discussion guide is one of them. So you don't want to skimp on your time and thinking around designing the very right discussion guide for the study that you're conducting. First, I think of it as a roadmap. Discussion guides are just that. They are guides. They are not survey questionnaires. And there's an important difference that I tell clients and colleagues or anybody who will listen to me. So whereas a quantitative interview guide has a very strict protocol, order, and language of questions that has to be duplicated every time, a qualitative discussion guide is different. I think of it as a roadmap. A guide is more of a roadmap, whereas a quantitative survey questionnaire is a much more strict protocol that you have to follow. So with a discussion guide, you want to make sure that you outline the key topic areas and subject matter that you have to cover in the conversation, whether it is a focus group or whether it is a dyad, triad, or a one-on-one interview. The principle is still the same. The guide is meant to help you as the moderator make sure that the conversation and the group covers what they have to in the time allotted. So that means a couple things. One, it gives you more flexibility, right? Because the guide doesn't have to be strict. It just has to make sure to identify the general path and direction you need to go to get from A to B in your conversation. But it does require a lot of active thinking while you're doing the interview, because you not only have to be aware of the topic and flow that you need to cover, you need to be listening for where the conversation is going organically and ensure that if you need to move around the subject matter, that you can do that successfully with a natural flow and still get to where you need to be by the end of the conversation. The second tip I have is to always visualize a funnel. Think of the guide as a funnel where you want to start really wide with broader topics, and as the flow of the discussion continues, it gets narrower and narrower and narrow down to any specific subject matter or executional details you want to cover. So visualize a funnel, start wide and go narrow, because it's a lot more natural with the flow of conversation and easier to guide people around these areas, rather than starting super narrow and then trying to pull wide and conceptual. That's really hard to do. So visualize the funnel and you'll probably be in really good shape. Number 3, focus on your objectives. When you're beginning to design your discussion guide, you want to tune into what are the project objectives that I have for this study? And then specifically, what are the research objectives that I have to accomplish in this discussion guide to help me meet those project objectives? Sometimes those two things will be the same. Your overall project objectives for the engagement are going to be the same as what they are for your research, but they may not always be. So make sure to tune in to what your learning objectives are for the research and make sure they ladder up to your project objectives. You don't want a lot of objectives in the discussion guide, right? You need to tune into what are maybe the 2 or 3 key learning objectives I have to accomplish with this discussion guide. And additional pro tip, I always put my objectives on the front page of my guide to remind me. So every time I start an interview or a focus group, I tune into what do we have to learn? What do I have to make sure I glean or accomplish as part of this session to make sure it was a useful, valuable session? So do that. Outline your objectives, put them on that front page so you can always see them. Tip number 4. Short and sweet, baby, short and sweet. So I think the best discussion guides are actually short guides, not because I'm lazy, which I might be lazy once in a while, but actually because it means that you are focused and clear on what you have to learn. I find that very long discussion guides are A, hard to get through in the time allotted. They're usually too much for the time you have. Or B, they're a reflection of a lack of decision making on the part of myself or on the part of my clients. So really aim for short and sweet when it comes to your discussion guides, and you will be in a much better place to accomplish all your goals in the discussion, but also to allow for that pregnant pause. The pregnant pause is what I refer to when you're not talking in the group and you're just allowing a natural or spontaneous response on the topic to come through from the people you're speaking with. And that is magical. I love having enough space in the discussion to allow participants to contribute to it and maybe to organically bring up an issue or a topic or possibly an insight on the topic that I haven't brought up or I didn't account for in the guide. That's a beautiful thing, and that's magic when it happens. Now, that said, you sometimes have to put questions in there. So when it comes to discussion guides, I find that researchers or moderators like to either have a whole list of questions articulated out for them, and that's what makes them comfortable. But there's other researchers like myself who really just need the main topics, and I'll write out a few key questions to remind me of really, really important things that I don't want to forget to ask. But I tend to do a blend of both. I don't like scripting out all my questions because it forces me to spend time on reading more than being present in that conversation that I'm having with the participant or with the group of people that I'm talking to. So I err on the side of mostly topics in the discussion guide with key questions, but you might be different. You might actually really like a scripted out set of questions that are fully formed. And if that makes you comfortable and it helps you do what you've got to do, awesome. Number 6. So the other recommendation I have, and the thing that I have found that's really helpful, is really knowing your discussion guide before you go into your groups or before you go into your interview. I realize that sometimes time is a bit crunched and you don't really have time to familiarize yourself with the guide, but whenever I am able to, I actually spend time really getting to know my guide and not memorizing it, but getting super comfortable and confident with the flow and the topic. That just allows me to, in the session itself, be really present with my respondent, and to have internalized the questions and topic and areas helps me navigate the guide and the group a little more elegantly, I think, than I normally would. And I will tell you, sometimes it can be super impressive for clients to see that if the client is attending the research and observing, it's pretty awesome to see a moderator who has kind of a command of the topic and isn't relying on a script or a piece of paper to guide the conversation. So if you want to impress your clients, like, try to really know your guide well so you don't have to rely on it too much and refer to it too much in the session itself. 7th tip that I have is allow time for your warm-up. Sometimes we are in such situations where we might have a 90-minute group, but we've got 2 hours worth of content that we have to get through, and that can be really stressful. And when that happens, it's really natural to feel you need to jump into the main discussion as quickly as possible. But think about this. My opinion and experience is that the warm-up is probably the most important part of a successful focus group. And if that warm-up doesn't go well, and if you don't set up the group in a manner that's going to be a more psychodynamic approach to the session, it can make the rest of the group really painful. And there's nothing worse than a painful focus group to whether it's a 90-minute group or a 2-hour group. That's pretty hard. So allow time for that warm-up where people can get to know each other, they can get to know you, and they can get to get comfortable in the environment they're going to be spending with you and opening their hearts to you with. So allow time for that warm-up, and what I might do on another video is talk about different warm-up techniques that I use that you might find useful in your groups as well. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this little video and it was helpful, please subscribe on the button below, and you'll receive an update when I have another one posted. Thanks. Bye.